one on the far side of any length of building that you want to establish. So it's basically here we've got 3-foot stakes driven into the ground and braced in both directions. We have a screw on top. We can attach a string line and pull taut to the other batterboard on the far side of this wall line. We can then move this screw, or we can add additional screws and pull our string to either side to get right on exactly where we want to be in our corner. It also allows us to get perfectly square in those corners. This is going to give us an exact definition of where we're going to place our form boards. We've established rough grade here, but we're still going to be off a little bit from perfect level from side to side. So what we want to do is find the high point. With the high point, we can then level out from there with our form boards, and we'll be able to fill around the outside of the form boards to hold the wet concrete in place as we pour. That's easier than digging the footings down even further into the ground. I'm using what's called a water level, and I've got some red food coloring in there that makes it really easy to see the top line of that water. Now, the basis of a water level is that water will always find level in gravity. So if I am here standing at this end, I can measure down to the ground and see my distance up to the top of this red line here that's established by the water. That's 34 inches. I have a helper on the other side of this line in the far corner who's measuring the same over there. Now, for example, if they come in at 34.5 inches, there's a half extra inch between the top of the red water line and the ground. That means that they are actually a little bit lower on that side because the number's bigger, so that they have further to go before they get to the ground. So we know that that end would be lower. That's the case here. Now, as we go this direction, we had a different finding. We found that that end was a little bit higher, so that had a smaller number. We had 33.5 over there instead of 34. So we know that we've got some higher corners and some lower corners. Well, now that we've established the high corner, we can go from there and pull out the rest of our form boards. For a small structure like this, it's easy to do it just like that and then level them as they go. When you're setting up the forms, you want to sight down the edge of the form to look for crown. This direction coming up or down is crown, and also some sway from side to side this way. If you have crown, you want to crown it up so that you're not creating holes in the middle of your slab. If you have some sway, you want it to sway out to the end or bow out to the outside. I'm exaggerating that in this case like this, because then we can adjust it and push it back in and stake it in place. If it's going the other way, it's much harder to pull the board back out and stake it. So you just look down the edge of it here. Now I can see that I've got some bow going out this way, and my crown is just right like that. So we'll leave it just as it is here. To attach the forms, we're using what's called a duplex nail. It's basically a nail with two heads, so we can drive it all the way down so that this head makes contact with the wood and pulls it tight, and yet it leaves us a head to pull our hammer out later and pull this back out when we want to strip the forms. Now, before I get too close to nailing these two together, I want to nail this duplex in until it's just poking out of the other side. Once it's just poking out the other side, I can line these two up, hold them in place, and one solid whack will put them together. That way I'm not banging it and having things move around on me as I go. I want to be sure that the tops are lined up nice and flush, and one shot locks them together. So now I can go back and tighten this up by hammering it in later, but I just wanted to get it in. Now I can adjust everything, make sure I'm perfectly flush, which I am in this case, and I'll drive it home. In order to square up the corner, we're going to use what's called a 3-4-5 triangle. Basically all that is I'll measure 3 feet in this direction and mark it, 4 feet in this direction and mark that, which I've done here. And then the hypotenuse of that triangle is 5 feet. So I'll measure from one side, marking it at the 5, and over. Now in this case I'm off. I've already squared some of the other corners, and so I know that there's something funky with this corner. It's not actually that the whole building is out of square. So what I'm going to do is look at my bow as we set it before. We know that the bow is going to the outside, and both of these boards are bowing pretty significantly to the outside. So what I can do is actually come in here right at my 3-foot mark, have a helper at the 4-foot mark, and just put a little bit of pressure to knee that board back in. And as we measure that, it comes out okay. So then what we want to do is brace it off in position. Now, if I take a regular stake here and just brace this corner flat like this, what happens when we fill this up with concrete is I can't get my trowel in here to finish off underneath this board, and I get a sore spot in the slab itself. So I just cut some pieces of the stake and set it up on top of that. So that way, once I've got my concrete in here, I can leave this brace on and still come in with my trowel and get right under there and get a nice clean corner all the way up to the edge of the form. So what I'll do here is just tack one side in place, and then again with a helper holding one side of the tape and using their knee against the form board there, I'll hold mine end here. And we'll both we're just giving a little bit of a tweak here because we know it has to do with the bow rather than it actually being the building out a square. Now we're right on the mark there. Get my brace in place. And that's got it. Now that our corner is square, we're going to work on the level and make sure that we've got a level slab all the way across. I've got a stake here in the corner with a screw ready to go so that when I get my form right in place, I can just screw it right in. Now what this is a concrete stake. This is a 3-foot concrete stake, and it has little holes drilled in it in opposing directions. Now you drive these into the ground. They're easier to drive into the ground than the wood stakes. You can really bash them into some pretty hard stuff. And with the holes already in there, you can just put a screw right in. It holds it in place. When you're ready to screw the form in place, you just go and drive it right through. So now we'll use the water level again to find out how we're doing on level from one side to the other. Now you want to establish your corner that you're working from, again the high corner, and work out from there in all directions. Don't go from one to this one and then switch and measure from this one to that one. You want to be consistent all the way around. That way if you miss by 1/8 of an inch here or there, it doesn't compound as you move through the process. Now as you can see here, I'm about a 1/2 inch low. My form board is low. The top of this water line right here where the red is topping out is the top of the form in the corner that I'm using. So what I'll do is I'll bring my form up until I meet that spot, and that's where I drive my screw. Now that, again, I want to make sure my helper's holding it right in the same place at all times because it takes a little bit for this water level to get set up. So with her right on the spot where I want her to be, I can set mine in place. There we go, and that's got it right on. This water level is a great way to level things over pretty good distances. This right here is a 50-foot piece of line, so it really does a good job at going a full distance and getting an accurate mark of level. Running a carpenter's level on the top of this wouldn't give us a very accurate measurement.